Excuse me, high school.
Who said that?
Okay, I'll show you the Notre Dame study. I'll send it to you if you want.
Like,
They're not saying it's good for them. They're just saying it was good for them, and who am I to judge them for doing that type of terrorism? That's what I'm saying. See that? So they're being consistent. So I'm going to allow them to do what they are going to do.
You're allowed to have cultural distinctions as long as you're not murdering a ton of people. Like, how is this inconsistent? Am I wrong? Like,
why is murder wrong? Objectively.
What?
That's your subjective
I feel
opinion.
like
We
I'm
just
in the
went through
Twilight
this.
Zone
We just
right
went through
now.
this. Honor killings are happening.
You have like some kind of proof that your religion, as opposed to others, is correct or the one people should follow?
Part of the challenge of being a student is that you follow the evidence wherever it leads. And so you're asking, well, what's the evidence that Christianity is true? It certainly isn't Christians, right? It's the content of Christianity. It's not just the Sermon on the Mount and what Jesus taught about ethics. You have to look at the content, not the abuse of what was been said. So, for example, if Jesus says, love your enemies, and then you look at the Crusades or the Spanish Inquisition and you ask yourself, what happened there, right? It's not necessarily easy to say, well, because all of these horrible things were done in the name of Christianity, then I can dismiss it. Let me ask you, is it rational to dismiss something by its misuse?
So I was asking you why I should believe that the Christian God exists rather than, say, Hinduism, which is a much older religious text, or say, I don't know, Sumerian gods. Why are they not real?
Right.
Why is the Greek Hellenic pantheon not real? Like, I could go on, but I wasn't asking about misuse, to be clear. I was asking about proof over other religions, not even over like atheistic belief, but proof over other religious structures as to why I should believe in Christianity and not, those.
Okay. Historically, right, that you place Jesus of Nazareth there over 2,000 years ago, living, dying, and then obviously the big claim of Christianity of whether it holds weight is whether or not Jesus rose from the dead, right? And so that's a big claim. And you're saying, okay, well, what's the evidence for that truth claim, right? That all of these eyewitnesses, all of these people died. They were killed claiming to have seen Jesus risen from the dead. And not only did that transform the Roman Empire, that went around the world in an incredible way. Because where's the center of Christianity now? It's not, I know you brought up Hinduism and Buddhism. It's like they have a very much clear center. Islam has a clear center. Christianity has gone all over the world. It's not, the center of it isn't here in the United States, and the center of it isn't in Rome. It could be in South America, it could be in Southeast Asia, but it has gone all over the world, and it appeals to people's minds because of how historic it is, because of how much evidence there is for its reliability. I'm going to hand it over to Stuart to think about that.
So, character of Christ, obviously he was not a lunatic, he was not the Branch Davidians, David Koresh type of leader or the Jim Jones type of leader. No, he lived a perfect life. He never spoke a word out of place if you read scripture. Secondly, the claims he made, I am who I am, appealing to clearly this call of God that you get out of the Jewish tradition. He also claims to forgive sins. Also, every time people would worship him, he would receive the worship, unlike Paul or others who would tear their clothes and say, I am not God. Then the Gospels and their reliability in terms of 5,800 manuscripts showing the photographs that were written, which is unheard of in terms of in every historical department across the country. If you talk to most academics, take Bart Ehrman, for example, who's the most famous atheist historian when it comes to something like the Gospels and the Bible. Even he admits, if there wasn't the supernatural in the Bible, in the Gospels, every single church historian, every single archaeologist, secular that is, would say, absolutely, this is Peter. You can take this to the bank. Clearly this happened. Then lastly, Rob already hit on it, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Everything hinges upon that. You go to Hinduism, for example, Nothing historical. There's no historical moment that had to happen in order to make the claim that Hinduism is correct. Christianity is the only religion that bears the weight of this happened or it didn't happen. And if it happened, Christianity is right. It occurred and Christianity makes sense and is true. If it didn't happen, discard it. How come you became agnostic?
Mostly because I grew up Christian. Yeah, I was completely Christian, fully, probably from the same denomination you are, I'm guessing. We were very focused on mission work and preaching as well. Long story short, I found a lot of their beliefs petty and incompatible with the idea of a loving God. And further than that, the more I looked into it, the more I realized there was no concrete physical evidence or like truly resonant historical evidence for the resurrection. I do believe Jesus Christ likely existed in history. I definitely believe he was like a real guy, so to speak. But I do not believe that there is enough concrete proof of the existence of resurrected Jesus, much less God, the Abrahamic God, to say I'm a Christian anymore. And if I did convert back to the Abrahamic faith, it would be to Judaism because they're way cooler. So.
Why do you believe the God of the Bible is not loving?
Because a God who would condemn people for, for example, being gay or breaking one of a number of fairly archaic rules. I mean, if you go back to the Old Testament, and I know a lot of Christians like hand wave the Old Testament as being washed away by Jesus, a God that tells a girl to marry her rapist is incredibly unsettling to me as an entity. And I just can't believe that like a cosmic power like that would be so concerned over, petty things like who you have sex with or like what you watch and read. It seems very like human in scope.
So why would you be a Jew then?
Because, like I said, I've talked to rabbis. I have family members who are Jewish. My godfather's Jewish.
But the Torah is all the Old Testament.
Yeah,
so everything
I know,
you just said that you don't like about
they
God,
have additional
you'd
texts.
be accepting and become a Christian. I mean, a Jew.
Jewish
you don't like
people
about
have more
God.
text than that and a great deal of scholarship on the matter. But like, for another thing, I think a lot of Christians tend to be much more literalist about the Bible, which like is unacceptable to me as a someone who's interested in history. I just don't think that like for example, Tower of Babel, to me that's clearly a metaphorical story about the perils of trying to elevate yourself to God's level. But to agnostics and atheists who have studied history, we know how language developed. And literalist Christians try to claim that it is a literal story about things that literally happened, when that could not be more obviously disproven by the actual development of language and the archaeological record from Africa and the migration of the Bantu-speaking people.
You discount the Bible because of biblical literalists. Your favorite band member, if he or she started living a very hypocritical life, if he or she took part in some great theft or murder, would you discount the band and not like the band anymore?
I mean, if I did still like the band, I would. For one thing, I have done that. I mean, there was a band where the lead singer was revealed to be a groomer, and I stopped listening to them because I didn't want them to get my money. So yeah, I did.
But
stop.
why in the world, though, just because there's some biblical literalists and just because there's some hypocrites, there's hypocrisy in every single group, would you turn away from the Christian faith?
Because you tell me I'm going to hell if I don't believe in it.
I'm telling you, how am I telling you you're going to hell?
Isn't that an inherent belief of yours?
No, not even close. Jesus Christ died for his enemies.
Yeah,
Jesus
but I don't
Christ
accept
welcomed a
Jesus
murderer
Christ.
into heaven on a deathbed conversion on the cross.
Yeah, exactly.
The character of Christ, the love for people who are very much unlike him. I mean, what other faith leader comes even close to that, saying, love your enemies, turn the other cheek. In every situation, you have to forgive 70 times 7, which is a complete number. No other religious leader comes even close to that.
It's like a protection racket. It's like the mafia. Accept my help or you go to hell. Like it's very, it's an unsettling concept to say the least.
Mm-hmm. So we're either worshiping something here on this planet, or we're getting outside of ourselves and loving an all-loving God and wanting to spend eternity with him. But I disagree with you because there's nothing in the Bible that says God is sending you to hell unless you obey these commandments. No, it's all by grace, especially in the New Testament, like you alluded to, but even in the Old Testament. So it makes clear sense to me where he is respecting and honoring our free will and decision making by saying, if you don't want to live in heaven with me, which is perfect, beautiful goodness, then you're going to live separate from me, and separation from him is a total paucity, a lack of, a disintegration of that goodness into a living hell. And I believe people are living in hell in this day and age. People who are going on and having a type of cynical attitude and a type of, say, just constant gossip and constant resentment. Well, that's the beginning of hell right there. Wouldn't you agree? If that just is played out over and over again and it becomes part of your own identity?
Yeah, but none of my friends live like that either. We live good lives here, and like I distinctly do not believe that the rejection of Jesus Christ should automatically, condemn you to a life without goodness or anything like that. Like, I believe I have a moral code, and I'm also very tired of Christians telling me that there's no reason for me to have a moral code.
Does everybody need to have your moral code?
No, they don't, but I really only associate with people who, have similar, ideals to mine, or
Isn't that tremendously exclusive and judgmental?
Not really. My ideas are pretty general. I mean, kind of the do unto others thing. I do like that verse.
So in the Roman Empire, moral even, many would say, like Josephus would say, if you have a baby that is taxing the rest of the family, you would discard it.
Oh, hell no,
and so
yeah.
why wouldn't I discard my child today, for example, if they're living very unruly? Because that's just my own truth, my own moral standard. It fit with the Roman Empire, so why can't it fit today? Why can't I live that way?
You
wouldn't judge me for that, would you?
No,
Okay.
It's fine. Yeah, you can live the way, as long as you're not harming other people. That's kind of the basic,
So discarding my child because she's really a tax on our
harming
family,
someone.
because we might starve to death if I keep that child in my family.
That's harming someone.
That's
You're
harming?
harming the child. Yes. Like,
Okay.
I don't see how you're.
But it's harming us, and we're all going to pass
But the
away
child-
if I keep the child here. If I keep the child within the family.
There are ways to.
See, there's different. I don't know. The harm principle makes very little sense to me, because the vast majority of the U.S. thinks that pornography is good, great, and even good for marriage. But you have women, actually, it's the number one way to get STDs, and sex trafficking has a field day with pornography. So to see how the harm principle is totally different, many will say, oh, that's good, that's healthy. But then many will really look into it and say, wait a second, these women are getting into serious physical trouble. And so the harm principle is very ambiguous, and it really is subjective.
Like, I believe that there are things that people can generally agree upon as harmful.
Generally agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so why, if I am in the Roman Empire,
We're in the United States of America
Okay.
in 2022.
but you're still saying your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, so
Yes.
I believe that's even worse, because now you have so many different truths, and some of those truths can be tremendous, deleterious, totally harmful to different people, and it's so exclusive. See, Jesus Christ, and specifically Paul in Galatians 3:28, talked about how there was neither slave nor free, neither male nor female. Females were treated like dirt. They had no citizenship. Slaves, obviously, even lower than females. Children were discarded. There was very little abortion because it was so dangerous, but infanticide was everywhere.
Ethics is a messy business. Like, Cicely Bach, I believe in care ethics for a lot of things. Like, I believe in basically trying to maximize social good for people, and I don't think that it's possible to say if we all follow one truth, we'll be okay. There's too much variance in the human population for that.
Don't call it God. Some transcendent source out there, not the Christian, has nothing to do with Christianity, where we have moral obligation to say that we are obligated to act in a certain way, to love in a certain way, and to understand we all agree that this is evil, that we have duties to do so, and that we even say to somebody else, hey, my daughter right here, who just smacked this other kid on the playground, hey, you should not have done that. You should not have done that, and that's not just our family personal truth. No, the babysitter over here would agree with me and say, hey, you should not have done that. And so that's appealing to some type of moral obligation outside of ourselves.
I guess I define the common good as what maximizes health and happiness for, the most people, but that's kind of utilitarian, but if you want a really quick explanation, yeah.
Utilitarianism was, hey, we got to go ahead and kill this specific person in the Roman Colosseum in order to appease the slaves so they wouldn't rebel and take over the Roman Empire. So it's better for the greater good. Let's just kill this guy. So that's utilitarianism writ large.
Like, you keep bringing up the Roman Empire. We're not in the Roman Empire.
Sure.
It's not a good metaphor for like our current day and
Okay, so
age.
we've just improved, right? Let's talk about, I was in Haiti recently. Let's talk about their ethics and moral customs, right? Let's talk about different forms of genital mutilation that is considered totally good and ethical. You wouldn't judge them, and that's today. That ain't ancient Rome. That ain't ancient Rome. That's today. Why is that bad? You wouldn't judge them.
Of course I would.
Why?
Because
that's so judgmental.
You're speaking from the perspective of one of the men who, like, presumably is like a figure of authority in that place. Because I'm sure the women
me as a
have,
white male would
women-
go down to Africa and judge them for
Women
those types
have-
of what they believe is ethical
Yes,
situations.
women have complaints. There are lots of organizations working to end female genital mutilation. And the fact that, like, you act as though it's some grand consensus that this is a good thing shows that this is a very, like, black and white.
Honor
world
killings is a good
now.
thing to many of those villages. Honor killings
Not to the women.
is smart in order to keep the
There are
community
people
together.
trying to end honor killings. Like, people in the cultures have
But what
criticism
makes
of the
them right,
larger
though?
culture.
What makes them right? Why is that wrong?
I don't know why I, like, have to defend this as, like, a harm reduction thing. Like,
Because
obviously
you started with your truth and morality is your truth and morality,
Yeah,
and you would
and I
never
qualified
infringe
that.
upon somebody else.
I did
so
not-
why
I
are you
never said
infringing?
that.
Why are you infringing
I
and
never
judging
said
that?
I would never infringe upon somebody else. I just said that is, like, I qualified it with that is true to an extent.
Yeah.
I believe that people are allowed to disagree with me about, like, whether it's okay for a guy in a desperate situation to shoplift a loaf of bread. I think that's okay. Someone else might not think that's okay. We both have a point there.
Yes.
We can debate that. But there are things that you can't debate. Like, there are things that are just straight up wrong. And I already qualified myself with that, so I don't understand why you keep bringing up these other examples.
So you would say, like, for example, when the Nazis were trying to say we're just following orders, that's all we were doing.
Yeah, unacceptable.
Well, they were just following orders, though.
Why is that an excuse?
Because their culture at the time, and our culture could easily slip in.
Okay, you're still arguing
to
with
that.
the version of me that I never, like...
I'm just trying to show you kind of a little bit of the contradictory nature of what you're talking about, because you're flip-flopping back and forth.
That's not true. I specifically qualified it with, like, people should not harm one another, which is what I'm not getting about the argument. Like, I think you're arguing with a kind of a straw man here. Like,
Straw
I
woman?
did not, yeah. But, like, I did not present that as my beliefs.
What was your belief? You got to clarify it.
Yeah, I'll clarify.
I heard you go back and forth
I
flip-flop a
believe
couple
that
times.
I believe that freedom is important. Like, I believe
Okay.
people should be free to, like, have their own perspective and believe what they believe, only to the extent that it does not do serious harm to the happiness and health of other people. Like, that's kind of my take on the matter, right?
Okay.
Like, I don't really see, like,
But how do you define happiness and harm then?
that's something that the legal system wrestles with every day. I mean, I'm in an ethics class right now, and I think that, like, there are a lot of questions as to what, like, happiness and harm are in the current day, but I think those can be answered through, like, debate and careful consideration. And I think there are some things like female genital mutilation that are obviously very wrong.
I just think you need to be careful, because saying those are absolutely wrong, well, where are you getting that absolute? I mean, again, I know one professor, for example, from Notre Dame, who went down to Africa, and she was a secular atheist humanist, strong feminist, and she went down there and she said, hey, look, there was genital mutilation going on, and I went down there to attack it, and I went down there to change things, but I came back disillusioned because I started to realize that's their culture, and that's how they do things. So who am I as a white woman, incredibly educated, going down here, telling them to change? What, just because I'm ethnocentric? I'm an American? And she came back, and see how she was consistent there? She was willing to say, I'm being consistent, but I'm going to say, this is kind of a brute fact, that this is just how it should be.
I do disagree with her because she could have helped. There are organizations in Africa working to end FGM, and she could have worked with them. I mean, if she wasn't already,
Yeah.
in an attempt to help women and girls who are affected by this. People in general, because, you know, intersex people can also be affected.
So maybe we just evolved more morally than those African villages.
No,
We're just
I
better
think
people, kind of.
We're individuals. That's the thing.
We're individuals.
Affected
They're
by our
individuals too,
culture.
though.
Yes, we're affected by our culture.
Okay.
Like American culture, has for years had a lot of kind of messed up like moral considerations.
But now we're
We
better
used-
than. Now we're better than them, though.
Slowly, we're not better than them inherently. There's nothing that makes. We are all individuals, right?
Okay.
There's nothing that makes one culture inherently better than the other because cultures are constantly like changing and shifting. Like, you know, someone could end FGM next year if the right person like was able to basically make the arguments for why it is wrong. Like, cultures are not stagnant. That's the thing. Like saying American culture is better. We had slavery up until very recently.
That's a very good point. So the legal system in the U.S. was started through Judeo-Christian worldview and ethics.
Also, the word Judeo-Christian is nonsensical.
Judeo-Christian is used endlessly, a ton
Yes,
in
by Ben Shapiro.
in our country today. Okay, we'll use Judeo-Christian then. The law that started in our country was started by our founders who believed in moral obligation and not moral subjectivity, moral obligation, objectivity, and moral duties and oughts. And so that's why when you go into a court of law, for example, there is a type of law that transcends culture. And you keep bringing it down to culture, and that's what makes me nervous because, again, another study recently, again out of Notre Dame, talked about how 38% of high school students now say that bombing the World Trade Center is okay because that was those specific people's truth. And you said earlier, your truth is your truth. Excuse me, high school.
Said that?
Okay, I'll show you the Notre Dame study. I'll send it to you if you want.
Like,
They're not saying it's good for them. They're just saying it was good for them, and who am I to judge them for doing that type of terrorism? That's what I'm saying. See that? So they're being consistent. So I'm going to allow them to do what they are going to do.
You're allowed to like have cultural distinctions as long as you're not murdering a ton of people. Like, how is this inconsistent? Am I wrong? Like,
why is murder wrong? Objectively.
What?
That's your subjective
I feel
opinion.
like
We
I'm
just
in the
went through
Twilight
this.
Zone
We just
right
went through
now.
this. Honor killings are happening.
If it's just a criteria that we're talking about, here's the criteria for why murder is wrong. First of all, it's not because me and you say it's wrong. It's not. It's not because of how rational or logical we are. It's not. Murder's not wrong because your ethics professor told you so. Murder's not even wrong because the court system here in the United States says murder is wrong, right? We're saying, okay, there's something transcendent, something outside of culture, country, around the world. It's called empathy, but some places don't value empathy as much as other places. And so who are we to go into those places and say murder is wrong to them if they say, well, that individual is no longer useful, that individual is no longer competent, or their quality of life is lower than ours, so we have to kill them, right? Then you have to really think and really ask yourself, okay, can I tell them that murder is wrong just because of what I've learned at a college or just because of what I've gotten from a book? Or am I going to be able to look around me and ask, okay, logically, I am appealing to something objective, something transcendent, to say that murder is wrong 100 times out of 100 times. It doesn't matter if it's some old person, it doesn't matter if it's unborn, it doesn't matter if it's someone in the middle of life just going through their day and people feel like, well, you did me wrong, so I'm just gonna kill you to get back at you as an honor killing, if that's what was called earlier. That's wrong. I don't care if you're in America or in India or wherever you are, an honor killing is wrong, right? Doesn't that make sense?
You're trying to talk about this as like, oh, well, you're gonna go over there and tell them they're wrong? Like, no, I don't have the time nor the money to do that, but if asked, I would say, yeah, I think that's wrong. Like, right. if someone from the culture asked me, I would say, well, yes, I do think it's wrong that you murdered that person. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you're free to disagree with other people's, like, beliefs and worldviews,
right.
And to the point of wanting them to stop doing that. But, like, the idea that, like, you have where I have to go over there and physically stop them, like, I can't do that. Like, right. You're free to disagree with other people's cultures and even advocate for change, or like work with the people in those cultures advocating for change. That's what I keep saying.
Right.
Like, there are tons of women working to end like honor killings, FGM, in those cultures, which I know about from like doing research into like phenomena like that.
So I just want to give you an example, because evolution can be a hot topic, but it's like, you got to define the term. Evolution is simply change over time. So why have we not morally evolved today if we think we're so much better? And this is where I feel like humanism is hollow. Why have we not evolved that we can't seem to get rid of war, or we can't seem to get rid of honor killings? All this murder going on, and it's like, are we really that illogical? Are we really that self-destructive? Something ought to change. And that ought points to, there's something outside of all of us that says, that ought not to be the way it is, right? And that's a very hard truth for people to come up against. Don't you agree?
I don't completely understand like the point you just made. Like, honestly, I don't really get what you're saying should happen as a, like, do you want to change people's minds? What are you gonna do?
They have their own choice, their own decision. We engage in a discussion over whether or not whose idea, right, has more evidence for its trustworthiness, for its reliability. And so obviously we are both agreeing that murder is wrong, but I'm trying to say, okay, well, we are appealing to something objective, something transcendent outside of every single person here, that there's a truth outside of all of us.
Like, I think when you say truth, you're saying like capital T truth, like it's a wink, wink, nudge, nudge to Christianity. We have basic empathy and compassion.
Yes.
I feel like that's the basis for most ethical discussion. And you're kind of sweeping that over with this idea that we require some kind of universal religious creed to coexist as people on the planet.
And I'm not saying that
you're doing it because, like, functionally you are Christian,
Sure.
and you believe that you derive morals from, what's the word, Judeo-Christianity.
no, from Jesus.
Yeah, I know, I was making a joke about earlier.
This world, what you reap, you will sow. This world is imbued with eternity.
That's
Every
literally,
single
that's very
person-
similar to Buddhism. Do you
It's
not understand
similar,
that?
but it's
Buddhism is
different.
about-
And so you have to ask yourself, if there are differences, do they contradict? No, very clearly we're saying truth is personal. God is personal as revealed in Jesus.
Like, how is that a personal thing? We all have the same Bible, right? We're all
Okay.
looking at the same text.
Okay. If I come up to you and say, hi Brady, like, how are you? Like, you're over there. You're like, no, my name's Brooke. It's about revelation, right? It's about how much is revealed in a relationship, right? And I think that's why it's so difficult for some of us to talk about this, is because we don't want to reveal who we really are.